Playing Possum Podcast.
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 Playing Possum Podcast. All right. I think we're recording. So welcome, Possums. It's just me and Amy Clem and Teton.
And Teton. What's up, Possums?
Teton's a corgi for those listening and is sitting in Amy's lap. We're at my house.
Trying to make out with me.
Yeah.
Okay. There you go.
So this is going to be a cash recording, and there may be a lot of dog breath in the background noise that may or may not be able to be edited out. So just deal with it. Yeah. Well, I asked Amy to be on the podcast a while ago, and we had to find a time to get Amy in town because Amy lives in the woods. And yeah, but Amy is my first artist friend. We're laughing because
sorry, I'm dying laughing. These dogs are killing me. They're like could be closer to the mic.
Teton's on the mic, buddy. You gotta get out of the way.
We were gonna we did it in this room so that we could lock them out.
But then we decided we wanted to be close to dogs. Yeah, so Amy's my first artist friend in Corvallis. We did Willamette Open Studios in 2016 or 2017 or something together. And we were there was a studio tour, and we just immediately were okay, we have to be friends.
Locked eyes across the room,
Yes.
Sat next to each other, and we're instantly buddies.
Yeah, and we're just talking about nonsense. But yeah, we have connected over the years about what it's like to be a working artist and the struggles of that, but also the joys of that. And so Amy's a friend of the pod.
Yeah, total fangirl moment here.
And yeah, so we're just going to chat about it. So I usually just have people introduce themselves. So if you want to introduce yourself and share what your background is, because you have a lot of creative backgrounds, so I don't want to miss any.
Yeah, totally. It's funny to sit across from you and have strong podcast eye contact,
Yeah.
even though we're just sitting. Yeah, so my sort of first entry into art world is through dancing, and that's what I've done my whole life and what I studied in college. And I moved from outside of Chicago to Seattle after school to perform, and was dancing with different companies, and eventually found my way into aerial circus world. And along the way, I picked up the hobby of making jewelry. And that's something that has transitioned more from a hobby into a real-time part of my income life. My husband and I do the business together, and it's called Pretty Artwear. And yeah, I don't know what else I would say about myself. You have to ask me questions,
yeah.
Otherwise it's a TED
totally.
Talk that I'm not prepared for.
No, you did great. Yeah, so I think one reason why I wanted to have you on the podcast is I think one of the really cool things that you've figured out with your jewelry business, you and Mark, your husband, have figured out is kind of how to figure out what people want and when they want it and what things sell. And you've kind of done a really good job of that over the years. And Mark has figured out kind of how to break into the Etsy market and how to keep yourself visible and all that kind of stuff. So I think listeners would really want to hear about that process of sort of because I think sometimes people see somebody who's has a successful business and there's but there's a lot that goes on in the background that people don't really understand.
Yeah, totally.
Of how much work y'all do to get that going, not only get it how much work it took to get it going, and then how much work it takes to keep yourselves visible in front of customers. And then you also kind of have your stuff on Etsy, but you also sell directly to customers, and then you also sell locally and stuff like that. So I guess that's one thing I'm super interested in hearing about, is just kind of how that evolved for you, and maybe what lessons you feel you've learned, and maybe what you might do differently, or what you would have done differently, knowing what you know now.
Yeah. Okay. So I've been making jewelry for 20 years, I would say. I'm basically self-taught. I took classes at one of the community colleges in Seattle, and then the Pratt Fine Arts Center, which is an awesome space. They have glass classes and metalsmithing. And that was where I first took my like blacksmithing for jewelry makers class. So I ended up really liking to work with iron and steel. And it was fun for me because those are like, I like the vibe of the alternative metals, but they're also like way more cost effective to work with. So I wasn't working with, super expensive 14 karat gold, which inherently makes me nervous to like play around or experiment with it. And for me, like, there are some jewelers that are so amazing. They can see something in their head, or they'll use like CAD design programs and they can like map it out and make it happen. That is not how my brain works at all. Like, I have to be working with the wire or manipulating things, and nope, that's not it. I got to try again. So my workbench is just like covered with all of these like half done pieces of garbage, but it's okay because I don't have a ton of money invested in that. So that was like alleviating a lot of stress like in the beginning. And I guess I'm talking about the steel now because I was also working with like sterling and gold filled and made a collection of jewelry, earrings and rings and bracelets and necklaces, and put stuff up on Etsy, and thought we knew like who our targeted customer audience was. And it ended up being a lot of guys that were buying the jewelry. And they were buying primarily iron and the steel pieces. And we were like, oh, that's interesting. And come to find out, if you look at like how there are those lists for like traditional anniversary gifts. So year 6 is iron and year 11 is steel. And they're essentially like the same metal. So we found this like niche market of people looking for, unique 6th anniversary gift was like our first successful SEO tag word. And it was a great way to stand out in the huge world of jewelry, especially on Etsy. There's like, I don't know, now at this time in the early or like mid 2000s, there was like 1 million artists that had Etsy shops. So jewelry was a huge percentage of those. So how do you stand out with like gold hoop earrings? Like, there's only so many words you can use to describe stuff. So being able to find this like anniversary niche was really like super cool. And I really like doing that work. I get to make these things that are gift oriented. People reach out to me and tell me like the sweetest things about their spouses or like the night that they have planned for their anniversary celebration. And I just get to be like a small part of this like lovely little snapshot of their life, like their relationship.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like where we are now, and it's working. But like some of the things along the way that we had to learn, I thought it would be really cool to do like custom pieces, or like made to order pieces rather. So you, Kat, would tell me about your spouse and say, whatever you wanted to about her. And then I would make a piece of jewelry, like thinking about Marcia while I was working and like sort of tuning into like the celebration that y'all are having in the vibe. Okay, that was cool to me, but that did not work for any of my customers. And I don't want to like, gender stereotype anybody, but I'll say typically my customers are like, oh, I forgot to get this. Can you ship it by tomorrow? So, okay, lesson learned. I needed to have some inventory on hand. I also really needed to know my like shipping times and distances, because you can Google stuff on, USPS and it'll say, 1 to 3 days. Well, that's an optimistic,
Right.
like estimate. So, and being accessible that way, which means like responding to messages in a quick, timely manner, and then having some of those answers and having stock on hand means that I can, make those sales, which is important.
How do you so that I think is one of my biggest struggles is I really struggle with having stock on hand or like having inventory. And so like I guess that's something that I'm really curious about, like how you went to build that up, because I think that's one of my biggest fears of like having an online option is like being beholden to orders, or like kind of having this like I guess sort of like, what if I don't have enough? Or I don't know. I guess that's always, and I think it's just sort of this black box of mystery of how that works. And so for me, I would like to hear about it. And I'm sure other people would like to hear about kind of like what your thought process is around like how much inventory you have, like how you navigate that. Cause I know you kind of go through like phases of like you are going to like work a lot and kind of build up that inventory and then you take some time off, or like, yeah, sort of how you navigate that.
Yeah, it's really like, it's definitely a dance because so now I'm making collections in silver and gold, and then I continued with the iron and steel, and I'm also making copper, aluminum, and bronze, which are years 7, 8, and 10. So I've narrowed my collection down to just necklaces and earrings. Those tended to be the best sellers. You know, they're easier to gift. Rings sizing is always complicated. Bracelets are pretty specific to wrist size, but also like how things like to be worn. So that's another lesson that happened after we'd maybe been selling for 5 or so years. We'd like whittled things down and then expanded into the other metals. And it's kind of like a little bit of guesswork. You can look back at your year and see what pieces were popular. So the next year I'll make more of those to have on hand. But then also like, it's so wild, especially on Etsy. I think you get caught in this like algorithm of success. Like this one pair of earrings will sell and then it will sell again and it will sell again because, you know, Etsy wants to promote items that are selling as part of their business model, which is great. I found myself like, okay, let's say I had 8 different styles of this iron earrings, and then one I sold like 65 pair of a year.
Yeah.
I just had to keep making them. But the thing is, you control like the inventory and the speed of that. So like when an item sells on Etsy, you don't have to renew it instantly. I would, because I wanted to get in that like, if there is like a little momentum behind it, because I'm trying to make money at this, you know? And then same thing on our own website, you know, you control the inventory that's available. And if it's out of stock, but available on back order is something you can, you know, manage and navigate. And for me, I feel like I'm really lucky in that, well, I never knew that there were so many things about like wedding business. I didn't think I would be associated with that, but a lot of people get married between April and October. So that's like our busy season. So now that we've done it enough years, we know that we can't just like slack off between October and April. That's the time to really make inventory. And I've been teaching. So Mark has a lot of visual arts background, but metalsmithing wasn't something that he had done a ton of. So that's something that I've been teaching him in the last couple of years so that he can do more of the actual making of the designs with me. And that's been really fun. We've like gone to the coast and rented a little cabin and like taken all of our equipment and do like a little retreat. Less like you can make it fun, but it's so helpful because there was definitely a time when it was like, oh my God, I'd get home from, you know, my other job as a body worker, seeing clients all day. And I'd be like, shit, I have to make 3 pair of these earrings today to go out tomorrow because I said they would sell or they would ship the next day, you know, and you've got to stand by that.
Yeah.
But that was all of my own making.
Do you feel like you're caught by that less now than you were, like, say, a year or 2 ago?
Yeah, for sure. Because some growth happened. I think it happens probably in any business this way, but sometimes the growth catches you by surprise.
Yeah.
And also like I was prepared for that year, but I didn't have 65 pair of that one earring. You know, that happened to be like a thing. And I was like, why doesn't anybody else want these? Like, can you buy these hoops or this swirly thing instead? So yeah, going through that. And, you know, this is something that you and I have talked about. I think to take your creative business, your art, and try to make it into a business that is actually generating income, there's like a fair amount of hustle that just has to come with it. Like you got to be down for the grind. Sometimes you literally just have to bang it out, whether it's wood or metal, but also you don't have to do that every day. And like being okay with slowing down or being okay with like, nope, this earring style is sold out because, so yes, I guess in answer to your question, I do feel okay being like, no way, I'm not waking up at 4 to do this. I'm not staying up till midnight to finish it. Like I got to have some boundaries too. And I think that just comes out of like more time of selling things and not having so much of that like beginner's fear of like, if I don't do it now, nobody will come back. Like nobody will want to, you know, I had the same thing like starting massage. I was like, I'll work on you anytime, night or day. Like, cause all my clients are going to go away at a moment's notice, you know, and now like, you have, that's not the case.
Yeah. I mean, you're so busy with massage and yeah. Well, and I think one thing we've talked a lot about is like also diversifying your income, which I think you've been really good about, is like, you know, you do massage throughout the year. And, you know, so then when you have those slow times with work, with jewelry work, it's a little bit better. Yeah. And of course, we're both like gonna have collecting another job working at our friend's gym. Amy and I were late to start this recording because we were at a meeting about trying to help our friend who runs a gym, an amazing gym, Helix.
Yeah, shout out Helix.
Helix Training.
If you want to get swole, come see us for strength and conditioning.
If you want to get huge like us, if you want to be able to run your own art business, you need guns. But I think that's something I feel like I've sort of learned from you of like, I think for me, and this is kind of like just to speak to what you were saying about that fear of like the customers going away or clients going away, is like, I think when you have that diversity and like sort of other things to lean on, for me anyways, it dissipates that fear a little bit. It also takes some of the pressure off of like, I don't know. I think there's this weird myth that I haven't met that person that is able to just fully make like a livable income on just making their art, who is not like, you know, and honestly, even the people who are really famous, they're not making much of their art anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, like they are hiring people. Yeah. And so maybe they're designing, but I think...
Well, it's like a scalability thing.
Yeah.
It's a physical duration thing. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, like... I think that's a really good point too, because I think that's one reason why I think I am really interested. Like I'm now working at the hardware store 1 day a week, and then I'm going to start doing this gym training 1 or 2 days a week. And I think like when I just work and I'm making stuff, like my body, it's too much for my body.
For sure.
And so I think that's something we're both super interested in, is like that longevity of being able to like use your body, be in movement, also be able to recreate, do the things we like to do. And so I think having that diversity of where you're using your body in different ways, then you're less likely to get those like repetitive injuries or just overwork or get sort of those, you know, like patterns in your body that like, I know when I work a lot, like all the machines are sort of like you twist
dominant
to the
sided.
right.
Yep.
And so then like I'm like stuck twisted to the right.
Mm-hmm. Same thing for me. I'm hammering at an anvil, and like I've tried to do it on my non-dominant side, and that does not work. Like that looks terrible.
I know. Well, Duncan talked about that on the podcast about like teaching himself to be ambidextrous, and I have worked on that a little bit, but there's
some things that are too fine.
I can't. And so it's finding that balance, I think, can be really beneficial, and just like versus like, I don't know, like I feel like there's this messaging that happens where it's like you should feel shame if you can't make money on just your art, sort of. You know, I don't necessarily subscribe to that, but I think that like, you know, like so many people are like, oh, I'm trying to make it doing my art, and it's like, well, actually, like, what if we redefine what that looks like, sort of? And like that's why I wanted to have you on the podcast, is like I think you actually run a really successful jewelry business, but it's not the only thing you do, you know? And so that's why I think it's really important to like have those conversations of like...
Yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely like what you define as success. Like I feel successful with it. It's a reliable, large chunk of like our income for the year that comes from something that we really like to do, which is kind of like the whole point of it. It's creative, it's dynamic, it's physical. For us, it was important to be able to do it like anywhere because we really like to travel. And both Mark and I are not good at just like only doing one thing. Yes, it's totally fatiguing for your body, but like I just think for your mind, for your heart, like I can't just do one thing. And I think a really perfect recipe to start hating your art is if you like are relying on it 100% for your income, unless you've worked yourself to the place where somehow it just happens like that. But like the moment I feel pressure of like, am I going to have like mortgage or rent this month? Or if am I going to have, you know, no, that's taking all the joy out of it. I like the diversity of it because it also, like you were saying, lets me ride the waves of like how things ebb and flow naturally through the calendar. So it's not such a problem to like really bust ass this time of the year because now I know I'm going to move into this phase, and it sort of feels more like organic and seasonal, which I really, really like. And there was something really genius that I was going to say. That's
Yes, I want to
slipping
hear
my
it.
mind now.
It'll come back.
Yeah, it will. Or it was never meant to be.
Yeah. Well, I think that is like what, to me, like, I don't know, like I feel like one of the things that's really been hitting home to me recently is like I think I had this like really strong need to prove myself, like as whatever this like weird measure of success that I had decided what would mean success for me based on what I saw other people striving for in my field.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So not even that they achieved it, but that's what they were striving for.
And so like I feel like one of the big things in the furniture world is like to be known enough that you want to be invited to be a travel teacher, and so I think that was like interestingly like I think because I hadn't reached that, then I was like, well, I don't feel successful. And like I think when I realized, and actually I think doing this podcast was what kind of helped me realize this, but like realizing that like, oh, like I don't actually want to travel to teach. Like when I travel, I want that to be vacation, like with my family or with my friends. And like, I want to build, like, I love like hyper local community. And like, that's what I love about Highland Woodshop. And that's what I love about like working at the small hardware store I work at and like the gym and like these things where it's like, these are the people that live in my community that I'm interacting with versus like being known by this random person in Texas who maybe wants to take my class once, you know, and then I'll never see them again. And I mean, I think why I wanted that is because that is how I met like my mentor, you know, like Yuri Kobayashi is like pretty well known, you know, but like also she doesn't want to travel that much anymore. And like there is something to like just having that community, and like she's fairly based now in Maine and teaching there. And I think, I don't know, like these sort of like false measures of success have been like, I've just been really thinking about them a lot. And I think so much of it is like steeped in like patriarchy and white supremacy, and like that we think at some, or for me anyways, like that once you're checked off by this unknown authority that you're going to be okay, or you know, like whatever. But it's like I think like especially after the event at the museum on Thursday, where it was like just this really fun event, the museum was really supportive, the Benton County Historical Society, shout out. And like it was mostly like people that knew me or people that knew my friends that came, and we had this like great party, and it was just fun. And like I think like that's what I hear when you talk about your work, is like the fun part of it, and like finding that versus like striving for something that is never like isn't even your goal, you know. Like, and I think that's what like I think I'm trying to like reframe myself and understanding that like, you know, like it's okay not to want those things for yourself, you know.
Totally.
Which is like not what we're taught, right? Is like to be satisfied in who you are and what you want your life to look like, and that you can design that for yourself. Because I think when you do that, it's like you are kind of dangerous, right? Because you're not relying on the system, and you're not a part of the cog, or like, you know, whatever of like, it's like I feel like the more I can let go of that, like the more I feel like I'm in my own power to like create the destiny that I want, versus like this, you know, whatever's been laid out, you know. Which is funny because even just being an artist, right, is so anti-society. But like, I don't know. But
even within that, there are like examples that are given to you, or paths that are laid out for you, that it's like, oh, you're supposed to want this, or supposed to look like this. And it's interesting to figure out what it is for yourself, because you really have like, it's a challenge to dig deep and figure out what the essence of that thing is. Like when I hear you talking about your mentors, I hear how influential they were for you and how important that connection was. Cause I imagine it shaped you, your perspective, your trajectory. And so I think maybe, this is just my opinion, that that's part of what you were craving.
Yeah.
And I see you doing that, but I see you doing it in our community here. And that's cool because it gives you like more opportunity to interact with people. It's not just like a week-long workshop that can be really like influential. Like you get to be part of these people's lives and like educate them and interact with them. And like, you guys are learning from each other and it's like growing each other. But you have to like figure out whatever that like distillation of the excuse me, of what it is that you're looking for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I feel like the thing that like, this is going to sound kind of silly, but I feel like maybe it will help someone. But I think for me, there is this desire, I think, in the art world, and maybe it's many worlds, but like to be known or like to be like for people. And I think that the like what comes from that is that people want their art to be seen, because for me anyways, the reason I do my work is because it's like a part of me. And so it's like I'm doing this thing that's kind of a part of me, and then when people see it, it's like I feel more seen and known. And so I think when I realized that, in the way that like not being known as like famous, but being seen and known as like the person that I am is what I was after.
Yeah, it fills that thing.
Yeah. And that's what like I feel like that event at the museum was like that for me, of like my community. I got to do this thing in my community with support, with a ton of friends, and got to be seen in what I'm trying to do on my creative journey, and like, maybe that was only like 50 people that saw it, but like that was what was fulfilling to me, because that was that thing that I wanted, was to be seen and known, not to be famous. And then I think when you're shooting for that other thing, then it's sort of like you're always not going to be fulfilled, because it's not actually, in my case anyways, it wasn't actually what I wanted. And then I was sort of chasing this thing and working with people I didn't really want to work with, or making things I didn't really want to make.
Yeah, that's the worst.
Yeah, so I think like one of my questions for you is like, how do you feel like you've gotten to the point where like, like you are making do you feel like you've gotten to the point where you are making the work you want to make? Or do you feel like you're still partly on that journey? Or do you see like, the work that you sell on Etsy is like one body of work,
this is
and
what
then
I was going to say earlier. Good job.
You have like a total different body of work that's kind of just for yourself.
Yeah. That's really good. You helped me remember what I wanted to say. But before I forget this other thing, I feel like it's interesting to think about fame as an artist, because coming up through the world of dance, like that's not even on the table. You know what I mean? Like, can you name any famous dancers? I bet you could probably name like
I recently looked up some modern dancer because her husband was famous. And I looked her up. I was like, this dancer was it's some guy who's kind of like a philosophy guy. And he was married to this woman who outlived him by like 40 years and was like this really amazing dancer. And they collaborated, but I cannot remember. I don't remember her name, but I read an article.
But so like, I feel like that was never really like the end goal. That's not really on the table. And there's difference between like, if you're the choreographer, maybe your name is a little bit more known. And there's obviously certainly people that like are famous and whatnot, but also like, I feel like I was luckily alleviated from that desire. And also I have had friends that danced for really, really like fancy international dance companies, and they still had to have other jobs to make ends meet. So I also never really thought that like my art would be my primary bread and butter. So that was kind of nice to not feel the pressure of like, oh, it should be like this. I do feel like in that diversification of different jobs, there's also a diversity in my art that I make. And I have like a lot of jewelers will talk about it as sort of like their like commercial collection, and then their like or their studio collection. And then it's basically like I have a line of things that I really enjoy making. I think they look great, but they're more like sellable. You know, I
Yeah.
also make stuff that I really like to make wire sculpture, and like weaving wire was where I started. I don't even know if I've shown you some of these old pieces, but like I could make these like collars or these big bracelets, and like you're sort of like wearable sculpture is what I was into. But like I like to wear that. But you have to like be willing to wear something that's going to feel like a little bit weird, or like your hair has to be up because otherwise it'll get tangled, or, you know, whatever. And that's not a very like universal product to put out there. It's not really going to work in the gift giving world, you know? So I feel like giving myself the design parameters of what I'm seeing over the last, like, I guess we've been like really doing jewelry, the anniversary stuff successfully for maybe a little over or maybe like a decade now. So when I can see what people are gravitating to, it gives me like design parameters for when I'm making new stuff, which is like a fun way to work for me, because then I don't have that analysis paralysis of like the world is my oyster. And that can generate like enough income and also like brain space that then I can do creative jewelry. And maybe I sell that at like an art show, or maybe I just make it for myself or friends, or even better, I do other kinds of artwork. Like I can go take classes. Like I was really getting into doing pottery for a while, and like all of these other creative things that make me happy, but I don't have to try to turn them into a job, which is also the pit I've fallen into many times.
How
I'm like,
can I monetize
how can I
this?
make these like, you know, ashtrays that I'm throwing on the wheel? You know, like just letting yourself create for the pure joy of creating, and also enjoying being a beginner and sucking at something, and just not having the pressure of like, this has to be good. But then also those things will feed into whatever it is that I'm making in a collection that tries to sell. Or something, you know? So like you never know what paths are going to cross and influence each other. And I think the more open you are to like different avenues, like, so studying Ayurveda is like the natural medicine of India might maybe be the easiest way to describe it. They have a whole aspect of like different gemstones that you would wear for different reasons, and different metals, like gold carrying the metal or the energy of joy and happiness and vitality and good health, and silver carrying the energy of like intuition and more of like your emotional feeling well balance. So I talk about that in my jewelry when I'm like writing the descriptions of things, because if people want to tune into that, cool. They don't have to by any means, but it's something I'm thinking about as I'm designing and putting stuff out into the world. And that's an influence from like a healthcare system that I'm studying, because it's the other part of my job and life and brain, but it is really applicable crossover, and I totally dig that. There's just like, it's like almost inner collaborations from all the different things that you learn that come together.
I think that makes sense too. And Ayurveda is kind of like the like acupuncture, Chinese medicine is to like qigong, because you study yoga, right? Like, is that kind of
they're like sister sciences.
And so it's sort of like a whole body wellness system. And I think that's something that you also apply to sort of like the way you design your life, right? Of like sort of looking at of like, you're not just gonna like do this one thing and focus on this one thing, you know. And I think that's something in some ways that like, I don't know, like I think a lot about like, I don't know, like, so like sometimes like with thinking about, sorry, I'm like trying to think about how to say this in a way that's like not palatable, but like just not so the way I would normally say it.
I'm like, just say it.
But I think like in some ways for me, like being queer and being genderqueer is like, I didn't have the option to buy into sort of the cis hetero world of some of these like lies that we're told of like, this is how life should be. And then I think also that's true for like being a working artist, is like you kind of like you like realize that those lies that people are told of like, if you just work this job until you're 65 and then you'll get this money and then you'll be able to retire and be happy. And it's like, I know so many people that like hate their jobs, and that's like, you spend a lot of time at your job.
For sure.
And it's just like, you know, like, and people are so cruel, I think, to artists because it's the same thing as like why people are cruel to queer people. It's why people are being cruel right now to genderqueer people, is like they haven't bought into this system and sacrificed this huge piece of their soul to some promise that is never going to be fulfilled, right? And so it's like, I think like it's like I always sort of say like I've just been retired my whole life, you know, because I've done all these things, and like it's not like it's been easy, and it's not like I don't work all the time. And it's funny because I think a lot of my friends like think I don't work that much, but like Marcia's always like, you work like 60 to 80 hours.
Yeah, we always joke that we're like the hardest working poor people.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, like yesterday I was at a job and I worked 3 different jobs yesterday from 8:15 to 9 p.m. You know, and it's like it is long days, but like I am engaging in things that I truly like doing and spending my time doing. And so I think it's like in some ways when people see that, it's like rather than understanding that's an option for them, it's like it brings up like anger or so I don't know, like I know for me, like, and Jamie and Casey, like we have talked about like having people kind of say these sort of not ideal things to us as artists. And so I'm curious if you get some of that, like if you experience that, and then also how you manage that, and like do you just let it roll off of you, or like I don't know, like because you've kind of done something, you know, like if people are like, you know, like when you did dance or like things like that, of like just how people receive that, and like really how much of that is their own projection onto you. And I feel like I didn't really understand that until more recently, of like that this has nothing to do with me and my choices.
Yeah, it's like just by being yourself, it's challenging something like a programming in them or a story that they maybe didn't even realize that they had bought into. And that can be very
alarming.
Yeah, that can be a lot of things, ungrounding. Yeah. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I don't feel like I have been treated in a like dismissive way. I also feel like I've just been swimming in this water for so long, and most all of my friends are artists of some sort too, you know, that's we're just sort of like all going through this together. But again, it kind of comes back to like, you know, when I was dancing and had my massage work business for like steady income, you know, like things were okay and stable. And then now, as I'm still using my bodywork practice as like the stabilizing factor for the jewelry business, and also like we really treat the jewelry thing like a business. Like I know I've heard you talk about cost of goods and like your time and all of that stuff. And someday we'll get together and I will make you an Excel spreadsheet, because like you just do it once and then you've got it. Like we know down to like the jump ring what the cost of goods is for our thing. And like, I don't know, like all the tech, like it is a business. And I think when you treat it that way, you can find success in it financially that opens up more creative space. So maybe that comes through like in the vibe when I talk about it to other people. So I haven't gotten that as much. And honestly, it could just be that I have 4 planets in Leo and I'm just like, I don't know, whatever, you can think of me what you want. Like I literally can't do anything about it. Or maybe people are just saying shit behind my back that I don't know about. No. It makes me so happy. Like getting to be creative, getting to work with my husband, finding successes in the wins. And like, I really like, especially working with these alternative metals, like they're so rough and dirty when you start, but then they get like shiny and pretty. And it's like they sort of sing when I've hammered them into the right shape and they go together. There's this like, moment of like, okay, that one's it. And they're, you know, all different because like you can't do anything like a robot the same way. I think that joy is worth it. And I feel like that's what I get to put out into the world. I get to be like a happy, fulfilled person versus somebody who's like stewing about, I don't know, their job that they hate or whatever. And like we all end up in places for different reasons, and it's it's hard to make different choices. But yeah,
Yeah,
I guess
I mean-
I want to contribute positivity to the people around me and my family and friends and community. And this is one of the ways that I do that.
Yeah.
And so it's important to me on that level. I don't know if that really relates to your question.
No,
but
I think that's really good. And I like what I hear you saying is like when you are in harmony and like living in harmony with your values, then that comes through your work, sort of, is like, you know. And I think like that's like the whole thing of like I mean, I do not want to make this about AI art, but I think there is something that is like, I'm not concerned about it taking over art, because I know what comes through in my work. I know what comes through in my friends' work. I know like it is like, it's a piece of us, and it's like there is only one unique, like, and I'm also like, I'm not, and I think I used to be more concerned about this because my work wasn't as reflective of me as like people doing the same thing as me. And I like now I'm just like, it's literally impossible for someone, even if they wanted to make what I'm making, like they don't have the skill set I have. It's impossible to like, and B, like they don't have my life experience, so it's never going to come through the same way, even if they were like. And Yuri has been proficient. Like Yuri has been so influential with me about having those conversations, and I'm like, aren't you worried about someone like taking your work? And like she's just like, no, they're amateurs. And it's not like, it's not in this egotistical way, but it's almost just like this thing where it's like, no, like they don't have the life experience. Like, you know, like, and that's, I think, like what I hear you saying about your work is like, you are coming through, you have created a business where you get to do the work, where you get to come through the pieces. And then that goes to the different, you know, families. And that is like what is fulfilling, is like you get to be a part of that moment in those people's lives. And like they're choosing you to be that person.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I'm so lucky to get to do that. And it's like such a symbiotic relationship of the more I do it, the more like happy and fulfilled I am. And then there's more of that joy to share with people. And I think especially, I don't know, I'm going to sound like an old person yelling at a cloud, but like, I feel like life is getting harder and harder in so many ways for everybody on different levels. But to think about people that are celebrating their love, pausing to do that, I feel like is really, truly epic. And that's going to it sounds really dramatic right now saying that, but it's important with everything going on. I don't know. And to get to be like a small part of that feels really cool. I feel honored by that. Yeah. And then I'm hoping that whoever's wearing the jewelry like feels good when they wear it and remembers the spark of that moment. I don't know. I'm a big believer in vibes. So
vibes. We sell vibes here. Yeah. No, it's been super fun to hear you talk about your work. And like, I think, I don't know, like there's just something that I've always super admired about the way that you just like, you have your vision and you stick to it, and you're like, you know, where I feel like I have waffled so much, and it's been helpful to have somebody in my life that like the consistency you have of like, this is my plan and this is what I'm doing. And I think, whereas I think for me, it's like, I think I've been in the R&D phase for like 15 years.
It's always there.
And I mean, that's what I love. Yes. You know, like that's the issue for me, is I love designing things and creating things. And once it becomes production, I'm like, I'm out, you know? And so like, I think it will be helpful for me to take like tidbits from this and think about it in a different lens of like that part where, because I think we are going to have these like bolo ties and belt buckles, and probably pare it down to just like one or two designs. And like, that's what we're going to make, and that's what we're going to sell, which like,
or start
feels
there.
like
that's
a straitjacket to me.
Well,
you know,
yeah, I hear you. But like, just looking at your table the other night, like, okay, you have a collection of like, what did you call it? The cosmic
cowpoke.
I just love that. But each one is different. And I'm not just talking about the different constellations on there. Like the wood grain is different. And then, you know, the way the constellation might feel with like the pattern of the wood grain, you'll be like, oh, this one's dope. And then you'll make the next one and you'll be like, this one's so good. Feel these corner, like, you know, you just find this, like, I don't know. I don't have kids, but I would imagine people that have kids or something are like, this kid's got this and this one's got this, even though they're both kids. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That's a terrible analogy.
No, I love
Every
it.
parent out there is probably like, she don't know what she's talking about. But and especially if you can find the joy in doing like production work, I mean, that is when things get like scalable. And
Yeah.
you can, you know, that was the other thing. There's so many, I could do a whole list of all the things that we tried and that failed, you know, but like doing custom, or not custom, but like each design is original. Well, then you have to have an original photo, series of photos, modeling video, words, title, all of, like, talk about creating more work for yourself just time and time again. Like, that's bananas. That's not, then you're just doing all the like scut work and none of the like cool design part of it. You know?
And that's my issue, is I think I don't want to do that work. So then I just sort of, but I think, you know, like hearing that, like what the way you were saying it is like, like a lot of them were really the same, but then like, you know, some of them my mom helped sand and like just these things where it's like, you know, and then I was able to play with like the different strings and different ends. And so, you know, like, but I think like you said, like paring it down to like, this is what it looks like, this is what you're going to get in the picture, and like versus like changing that, because like I'm like, I want each one to be individual.
I hear you. I want everything to be like a magical unicorn for sure. And we tried that. You know, I could take you back to like deep Etsy days, like when we were still in Seattle, like of when I was working with this cool stuff that's precious metal clay, like everything was different. And then, so Mark does all the photography, web design, SEO, like all the marketing. So he was like having to take, you know, pictures of all of these different things. Oh, nightmare. But there's something really cool about make 100 of the same thing. And number 100 is not going to look like what you really liked as number one. And then you're like, oh, wow, the ends of these wires now I'm hammering have this like rounded square shape, or like, ooh, look at the way I'm bending the metal here on 2 dimensions and it catches the light in a different way. And so the design naturally morphs over time, which is really cool. And you get so like precise with your skills because it's repetition, but it's also, you get so efficient. I don't know. There's some really cool, like learning stuff. It's like, you know, we both play music, playing your scales. You get good at it. You're like, I just pick up my guitar and noodle around. But, and then like from that place, I feel like, you know, your product more, like not your product, but like your materials. And then that changes the design level.
And that
the
did
next
happen.
time, you know, which is cool. And like what's possible. And, but I will say, because what you're talking about really reminds me of where I felt like I was earlier, and in keeping theme with like when I play possum, I used to feel really, really like my jewelry is like so basic compared to what other jewelers do, you know, because there are people doing like amazing things and with these stones and just like different styles. And then I finally realized like, A, that's what I like to wear. But B, given the lifestyle that I've set up, or that we've set up for ourselves, and some of our design parameters, like wanting to be able to make stuff while we're traveling anywhere in the world. Okay, well, I can't take a full like soldering kit with me and plan on working with flames and gas or like, you know, toxic chemicals. Like there's a lot of stuff that goes into jewelry making that does not work. Like we live out on the very edge of the national forest. There's salmon in the stream right around us. Fire danger is very real. So like, I really, when I was setting up my little studio in the converted RV, you know, I had to think about like, okay, these are cool techniques, but they're just not available to me where they are here. And like being okay with that. And if another jeweler wants to look at my stuff and is like, oh, they're just like cold forging and doing traditional metalsmithing techniques on this. Okay, fine. If they want to be judgy about that, because you can get really good at stuff that like seems basic, like just filing. Well, I think you were talking about sanding. I can't remember if this was a conversation or if it was on the podcast. There's an art to sanding, right?
Oh yeah.
Like you can F it up. You can do it straight up wrong. So same thing with like, you know, just like filing the edges of metal or what have you, or just hammering it in the right way that you get the patterns, the design that you want and the reflection that you want. So that is definitely was a possum-y place for me earlier that I feel like more secure in now.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think that makes sense too. And that's also like, I think part of that narrative that like you have to be doing these like really extravagant things to be, and I think that like feeling comfortable not being interested in certain techniques in your field is what actually makes you figure out what your artistic voice is. Because if you're like, I
Charge
need
you
to know every
everything.
technical thing, and like I've talked about this before, is like for me, like the technical skills I want to get are the ones that help me say what I want to say in my work. Not like, I think there is this more patriarchal idea that like if you just check off the technical skills and then you're good at that thing.
Yeah.
And then, but like, I know so many technically proficient woodworkers that do not have any kind of voice in their work.
Yeah.
And like that to me, then their work doesn't resonate with me.
No.
And so
you got to hire them for your shop.
Yeah,
because if they're technically proficient, that's how you scale your designs. You're like, here, this is what you're making.
Yeah, totally.
Do your best.
Don't complain about
but I hear what you're saying for sure. There's no there's no like energy, personality that comes through, or like
right. And like being comfortable with stopping at the skill level you need to say what you want to say, or to like, I think that there is this like that you don't need to like conquer every possible skill or learn everything, like you were saying, it's super fun to learn new things and be a beginner and be creative. Like I think that is really important, but I think that there is also like, if you feel uncomfortable in the skill level that you are, then that is where you will play possum, or like if you feel like, I don't know. That's been my experience is like versus just settled and like, this is where I'm at. This is the work I'm going to make right now. And I'm going to enjoy that. And if that changes, that's okay.
Yeah.
But
then
like,
you can, make a different choice.
Yeah. It's, like, who knows? Maybe somebody's going to open a community jewelry shop and then you would have access to more tools. But like, like this is what you have access to right now.
Totally.
And so this is what your work is going to look like. And I think that's the other thing is like this myth that like, I always say this to myself where like, I think one of my playing possums thing is like, I need all access to all the tools to do the things I need to do because I have mostly worked in like really set up wood shops and schools and stuff like that. And then I think about like these people that are like working in a 1-car garage and they also fit a car in the garage and they just have these things. And it's like, if you want to do the work, there are no obstacles for you.
Totally.
And so like, if that is the obstacle for you, that you don't have the space or you don't have the tools, like, then you're probably just haven't found the right medium or like whatever it is like, like try printmaking. Like all you need is like a lino cut, a linoleum and a little tool, or like, there's so much stuff you can do like that's creative. Try cooking, try changing your clothes. Like there's a lot of ways to be creative that like I think people are like, I need an art studio, a full art studio to be able to do this. And otherwise I can't do anything.
Totally.
And then, and I don't like, I get that, but I think it's also like, I hope that people find other avenues to let their creativity out. Like my friend Mar, I'm hoping to have them on the podcast, but
I met them at the event. Yeah.
They don't have access to a shop all the time. And so then when they don't, they bake these like amazing, beautiful gluten-free bread, like sourdough bread, croissants, like these kind of things. And so it's like finding that avenue to me is like, that's what I always want to encourage people to do, because it's like, there's this idea, like people are always like, well, I'm not creative. And I'm like, lies.
Yeah, totally. It's worth like digging in and like exploring those questions a little bit more of like, oh, you feel like you can't do this if you don't have all the things. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And then, well, what can you do with what you have?
Yeah.
Or what are other things that you could do that would, like, what's the feeling that you're looking for? Is it being creative? Is it exploring? Like, what are the other ways you could do it? But yeah, because like you've seen my studio, haven't you?
Yeah,
It's a straight
awesome.
up like RV travel trailer. And I have to have like a wooden block that I stand on to hammer here. And then I use that wooden block to raise up my polishing device. And like, you know, we have to clean it up real good when my mother-in-law comes and visits, because then Mark and I and our 2 dogs sleep in there because,
Yeah.
you know, we just have a 1-bedroom house. Like, so you can get creative and make things work, and then spend your time and energy on like the tools that really make sense for what you're doing too. You know, speaking of tools, like it can get really like, you can get really caught up in like, oh, I need this or this or this, best this, which I don't think is always true. But then getting the things, if you are going to do something on like a production level or sell it more, that can save your body, your hands, whatever, save you time, make something easier, whether it's on your body or your brain, or like just the clock, if it makes it go faster or something. Like I've gotten a few things over the last few years that have just been like total game changers, because then you get to spend more time in that joy space too. Like I used to polish all my metal with this like, do you know what a flex shaft is? It's kind of like a Dremel tool, but it's got a motor, but it's like a handheld device. And anyway, just like these brushes. And so I'm doing this like you know,
Yeah.
and then you get to a certain point where you're like, I am spending all my time doing this one part of the, you know, making process. That's not going to work. So it is good to be open to tools and things like that, but you can still do it in an RV, y'all.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. Amy and Mark live in like the most beautiful place, Lobster Valley. Am I not supposed to?
That's
Maybe I
okay.
have to
I
find.
actually think our business address is probably our home address, so
Yeah.
that's fine. Yeah,
But
we're out in the forest.
yeah, it's such a beautiful spot. Yeah. The last thing I want to ask you, and we can edit it out if you don't want to leave it in, but I think one of the things the Possums really want to do is like to have visibility for queer artists. And I know you've talked a lot about your husband, but that you do identify as queer. And so I think like I just want to like, if there's anything you want to say about that, or just share anything, because I think sometimes it's really easy, like when you are in a more traditional, what appears like heteronormative relationship from the outside. So if you feel like sharing that, or we can edit it out, but just kind of wanted to offer that, because I think that's something like right now, like having visibility for queer artists feels like where I, you know, like it feels important.
Yeah, totally. Well, and it's also interesting, like working in the world of jewelry, which is often traditionally worn by women. But that hasn't always been my customer, which is awesome when that happens. And then certainly doing anniversary jewelry is often a lot of, you know, hetero couple clients, but that's not always how it's going. And I really am excited to be a part of everybody's anniversary celebration. And it's interesting, like, I don't know if I identify with the word queer as much as like, it's really just about the person for me.
Yeah.
You know, who I love and who I have been with in the past and who I'm with now. So I don't know what word that falls under.
Yeah.
But I feel like I get to be a part of that larger sense of love and personal connection in the work that I'm doing now. And that feels exciting and important to me. And it's kind of funny looking back now in when we named the business Dirty Pretty, because that was, I don't even know, like at least 15 years ago now. And that name came from my real frustration and refusal as somebody who identifies as a woman in this lifetime, of how you could only be like the pretty girl or the funny girl or the smart girl, and how baffling that concept has always been to me, of like, why would you think that women are one dimensional that way?
Yeah.
So I really appreciate like finding those great juxtapositions that we all have, hence the dirty pretty. And also like I get so dirty and gross when I'm working with iron and steel, because it's covered in this coating so that it doesn't rust. And then I get to take this sort of like industrial throwaway alternative metal and make something really pretty out of it. And it's interesting to think, I was thinking about that, how that felt like an important statement at the time to make. And in some ways that's changed, in that I feel like people's views of what women are and what they're supposed to be, or just gender in general, have softened and changed, but that also might be from my like liberal perspective and siloed a little bit, because I realize in so many ways things have changed and in so many ways things haven't.
Yeah.
So speaking to inclusivity and juxtaposition and trying to be happy and okay with all the facets of ourselves and our personalities is important, and in some ways now more than ever.
Yeah. Well, I think that's such a form of resistance. And like, I think just hearing you talk today, it's like, I think like to me, like being the full 3-dimensional version of yourself is resistance. Like if that's all you can do, like that is such an incredible form of resistance and changing that narrative that we are only supposed to be one thing, you know? And so I think like your work does that, like the name does that, you know, the way you live your life does that. And so I think like, you know, it's like, I think people get caught up on like the resistance needs to be some big event or like, you know, like doing X, Y, or Z. But I think like, to me, it's like if we just start building what we want over here and stop paying attention to this over here that is like nonsense, then more good is going to happen over here and people will be drawn to that, is the way I believe. And maybe that's naive, but I think like when I get caught up in the nonsense, that's when I get caught up in fear and like not having enough or all of that kind of stuff, versus like if I sort of focus on just becoming the person I want to be and creating the community I want, then that it just shifts my energy.
Yeah. Well, there's like an inner resilience that you cultivate from that. Like if you get to know like all the facets of yourself and you're making choices that satisfy like who you are on your deepest level, and you are inclusive of all the aspects of yourself, I feel like there's less like cracks for the bullshit to seep in. You know, if you're telling me that I should be this or that, but I am okay with who I am and like, dare I say, even like myself, you know, like that's gonna fall away as noise and not be embodied. Not that that's an easy process by any means, but yeah, I think like living your life on a day-to-day basis in a way that's in alignment for what you want. So you're being the resistance every day.
Right.
I mean, I don't know, what else to do. Otherwise you sort of end up caught in the game.
Yeah.
But it's kind of got to be both.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's like, you know, like in the theme of playing possum, it's like if you feel like it needs to be this big grand gesture, then you sort of get caught and sort of playing dead, because you're like, how could I possibly do all of those things, versus just choosing like just one step towards being in alignment each day, you know, and that if that's what you do each day, then hopefully, you know, you're moving towards being in alignment and doing the things you want to do and living the life you want to do, versus moving away from that or just not moving at all, playing dead.
Yeah,
stuff.
Totally. Well, and that's how the community comes together too.
Yeah.
If you're an embodied individual that's feeling okay with themselves, you gravitate towards other people, and then you get to support each other and listen to each other. Just because you're feeling okay about yourself doesn't mean like shit smooth sailing every day.
Oh, for sure.
You know what I mean? But you can like bond over those things, and like it becomes a different level of support and lifting each other up. And then pretty soon it's not just like individuals, but people like as a collective and a community, and like the power in numbers. And, you know, at least in some ways, I feel like you can create change or create the change you want to see in your day-to-day experiences, like maybe on your local level, I guess would be a better way of, and then that can expand out from there.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, hopefully what you get to experience on a day-to-day time frame is one of like support and love and, you know, being seen and like cultivating that inner happiness. Like the vibe of your event last week was, I feel like, a really good example of that.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, like the 3D version of like not, you know, like it was like I was in a snake suit wearing a cowboy hat, but also showing like fine woodworking and line dancing, and, you know, like just like letting all of those aspects of your life come forward, and not, you know, one is not more, I mean, obviously sometimes you have to lean into one more than the other, but like the one is not greater than the other, and that they're all part of you, and sort of allowing those parts to come forward.
And that there's tough stuff going on specifically in the world and in the world of gender equality and transgender and LGBTQ. And like, yeah, they're like, the timing of that event was intense in some ways, but to have people come together with their full present embodied selves created this, like, the container of the space where we could celebrate and have like the visceral experience of that joy, celebrate the work that you've been doing, launching of creativity out into the world. And it was like, I don't know, port in the storm or whatever, like that phrases, you know, of like, and it was through intention, you know,
and support, and your support
for sure. But I mean, you know, like that's that's all part of it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Does that answer your question
definitely.
or speak to it at all?
Yeah. I think we've said what we need to say. We have clearly solved the world's problems.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, I just super appreciate you doing this and making the time. And it was super fun to hear you talk about your process. And I think our call to action is to make something dirty and pretty. So yeah, thanks so much for coming on, and we'll see the possums next time. Toodles possums.
Toodles possums. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.